All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome and good evening to our December 2nd regular meeting of Council, which I will now call to order. First up is the adoption of the minutes of the Council meeting held November 18th, 2013. So moved by Councillor Powell-Davidson, seconded by Councillor Neufeld. Are there any errors or omissions? All right, seeing none, all in favor. Opposed, carried. And moving on now to approval of the agenda, and that is at the regular council meeting of December 2nd, 2013. Agenda be approved. Moved by Councillor Morrison, seconded by Councillor Powell. Any additions, changes? Seeing none, I will call it. All in favor, opposed, carried. And now we're moving into committee appointments. So of course, ladies and gentlemen, it's that time of year, the first meeting of December, when we make our new committee appointments. Although you'll note here probably, if you've been paying attention anyway, that there aren't a whole lot of changes, mostly the status quo. I think everybody's pretty comfortable where they're at. However, one of the changes, after having some discussion with Councillor Greer and also talking with Councillor Morrison, we thought it might be a time for Councillor Morrison to get some chairmanship in with the Citizens Advisory Committee. And we're going to make you talk more, Councillor Morrison. And other than that, some of the other changes, we can go through them if you like, but the Audit Committee, we try to get folks on there that have not yet had an opportunity to serve on that committee. The PARCEL Tax Review Panel is pretty self-explanatory, and certainly if Council has any thoughts, you can weigh in. We'll start with the 2014 committee appointments, and this is council appointments, and there is a recommendation there on, well, I don't know what page it is on your agenda, but that myself, Councillors Greer, Councillor Powell-Davidson be appointed to the Audit Committee for the period of December 2nd, 2013. Can I get a mover for that? So moved by Councillor Lefebvre, seconded by Councillor Powell. And any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Carried? And I said that slightly wrong. It's from December 2nd, 2013 to December 1, 2014 inclusive. All right, moving on to the PARCEL Tax Review Panel. And again, there's a recommendation there. I won't read it all out, but it basically includes all of us. So do we have a mover and a seconder? Moved by Councillor Greer, seconded by Councillor Powell-Davidson. Any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Very good. And now to Section 6, appointments to boards, commissions, and associations. Very long recommendation there. I'm not going to read it all out. Do we have a mover and a seconder? Moved by Councillor Lefebvre, seconded by Councillor Morrison. Any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Very good. And then appointments to boards, commissions, and associations. These are our liaison roles. Some small changes there. Yes,
Your Worship, just a couple of changes in titles. On item 7G, it's that committee is no longer known as the Oceanside Accessibility Committee, but it's rather Access Oceanside Association. It's now become a society.
Right.
And item J, the Oceanside Healthy Aging Initiative Committee is now known as the Oceanside Healthy Aging Association. I'm sorry, the Oceanside Healthy Living Association. And it's also becoming it's got society status, nonprofit society status.
All right.
So Oceanside Healthy Living Association and Access Oceanside Association.
So we'll consider those friendly amendments, obviously, since they're just a change in names of the groups. But I do need a mover and a seconder for the general recommendation. Moved by Councillor Greer, seconded by Councillor Powell-Davidson. Any discussion? None. All in favor? Opposed? And that's carried. Fantastic. All right. That concludes all of those appointments. Now, moving on to delegations this evening. We have two delegations tonight. The first is from Island Health. It's regarding community food security and strategies, but I know that a big part of the reason why those folks are here, or this lady is here, is as a result of Councillor Powell-Davidson. So I thought I would allow you the opportunity to just introduce what it is that we're going to be hearing about, and then you're going to have to do it all, though. You're going to have to ask her to come up and explain everything. Go ahead.
I can handle that. You can come on up, Annalisa. First of all, I think I put in that our presenter's name was Annalise. I think I put that in to our notes, and her name is actually Annalisa. I met Annalisa at the Food Connections gathering in October for all of Vancouver Island, and we were talking about food strategies and funding. A lot of us learned about food strategies at the UBCM, Union of BC Municipalities, in September. As you all know, I'm very much a local food advocate and an advocate for food security. So I do have the intention of bringing forward eventually a motion to create a food strategy for the city of Parksville, and I felt that this would be a very good first step to invite Annalisa here to give us some information about food strategies, the benefits that they could have, that developing one could have for Parksville, and also some new funding that's coming available that may be helpful to us. So I'd like to introduce to you, Council and members of the gallery and media, Annalisa Blake is with Island Health, formerly known as VHA, and she is the project lead for food security and healthy lifestyles. And she has kindly agreed to come and present to us this evening, and I'd like to turn it over to her. Thank you, Annalisa.
So, Annalisa, just before you begin, make sure that little red light is on, and we generally allow for about 10 minutes for the presentation, and then some opportunity for questions.
Okay.
All right, thank you, and good to have you here.
Great. So, as Councillor Powell-Davidson noted, I'm here just to talk about the concept of a food strategy, just to familiarize yourself with what such a strategy could accomplish for the city of Parksville. So I'm just going to talk about sort of what a food strategy is defined as, what would be included in a strategy and in the process of developing a strategy, and why Parksville might be interested in developing such a strategy. So what is a food strategy? A municipal food strategy, it's one of many different mechanisms that are used by communities to forward food security and sustainable food systems in a community. And it is defined it's kind of emerged in the academic literature just quite recently, and these two authors are actually from Vancouver. So this is Vancouver and BC are sort of a hotbed of innovation related to food systems and food security work. And so they're defining a municipal food strategy as an official plan or roadmap that helps city governments integrate a full spectrum of urban food system issues within a single policy framework, including food production, food processing, food distribution, food access, and food waste management. So there's some key elements of what is included, or what distinguishes a food strategy. So one of the key distinguishing factors is that it builds on work already underway within the community, and creates links between existing policies and program levers. So it's gathering up all those policies that might already exist from a municipal government perspective, putting them into one framework that encompasses the whole food system. And then it gives an opportunity to address gaps in what policies might already be in place and integrate new ideas. And another key element of municipal food strategy is that the strategy itself and the implementation of the strategy is typically embedded in broader municipal goals and municipal departments. So the breadth of a food strategy often crosses over different departmental silos. And so what's included in a food strategy? And this comes from an article out of London, which kind of takes a good critical look at the London city food strategy. And in this particular food strategy, and this is typical of many food strategies and is a loose model that could be applied for Parksville, is breaking up the document into looking at different parts of the food system. And so here they've got production, processing, transportation, storage and distribution, retail, purchasing, preparation, storage and cooking, eating and consumption, and disposal. And that's actually a very good kind of comprehensive breakdown of the different things you'd want to consider in a food strategy. And then they look at the actions and policies that fall under each of those parts of the system and link them to areas of possible impact and benefit for the community. So it's a holistic view of the food that the city produces, stores, delivers, sells, consumes, and wastes. So this is just a little more detail and maybe putting it in the context for you of the city of Parksville. This is just demonstrating how a lot of different existing things in the city of Parksville could come together under the heading of a food strategy. So you have your city levers, including things, and Councillor Powell-Davidson did some research to help bring me up to speed on what Parksville already has in place. So your backyard chickens policy, sustainable community builders checklist, your zoning bylaw, smart growth principles that you've subscribed to, your official community plan, your strategic plan and long-term goals statement, all touch on food in one degree or another. Community assets, so these are initiatives already happening in your community. I'm not going to go through them all, but everything from production to charitable food sectors to business and food industry. So, also including fisheries, which is one aspect of the food system that often gets overlooked. People think agriculture, but we're on an island. We rely on a lot of fisheries here, and we have a great resource at our doorstep. And other policy levers at other levels of government, including the RDN Agricultural Area Plan, linking to neighboring municipalities. Neighboring municipalities often have assets that they can share with one another, so you don't have to reinvent the wheel in every community when you have a network of neighboring communities. For instance, the Nanaimo Food Share Society has a food box program that they run where low-income people are able to access a healthy food box for $10, and it's a bulk purchasing initiative. And so they've expanded their initiative to serve clients up in this area in Qualicum and Parksville. And so that's an example of where you might look to what other assets other neighboring communities have to integrate into your strategy. And the agricultural land reserve is something at the provincial level that would be potentially integrated into your strategy. And the core public health program, which is through the Ministry of Health. I'm here because, my position exists because the Ministry of Health has a set of core public health programs, and food security is one of those core programs. And so there's a whole provincial framework that outlines some priorities for advancing food security in the province. So how is it done? And this isn't a prescriptive roadmap that you have to follow. It just outlines it gives you an idea of how you might progress in developing the strategy. So the first step being establishing a mandate to develop a food strategy, and I guess I'm one step on the way to establishing a mandate if that's the way that you decide to go. Also on the way to that could be developing a food charter. So food charter is kind of a collection of value statements related to your food system, how you envision your food system ideally being in Parksville, and that's something that many different stakeholders, these are broad statements that many different stakeholders can agree to, and that goes to informing your strategy when you go to develop it. And with the City of Nanaimo, they've kind of done both a strategy and a food charter in one stride, and they're integrated together. And there's many ways you can do that. We're working on an island-wide food charter in Island Health that we can share as a template for municipalities to use, or other food-interested organizations to use as a starting point. And it's a great way to engage your community and start to get them thinking about what's important for the food system in Parksville. So next would be identifying a lead department or staff team to develop and implement the strategy. That's kind of just a logistical detail. And then you want to engage with some key stakeholders and joint actors. And so this is where you get together those key representatives in your community that maybe they run organizations or they're pillars of a business community that are interested in food security. And that becomes your advisory committee and sort of more of an expert advisory committee, and they can play a role in helping to develop the strategy itself and inform the strategy before you take it out to sort of the community more broadly. And this advisory committee might also become, at the next stage, become a working group that helps to implement the strategy. So many of the actions that might be identified in the strategy might be in the purview of another organization outside of the municipality. So that's where you kind of create some ownership amongst the core group of actors in your community that can make this strategy come to life. And so then you begin the process of taking stock of existing policy and program levers that exist that are related to food and are helping to move the needle on food security or establish a sustainable food system in your community. And then looking at where are the gaps in those existing policies, in those existing programs, and what are some new ideas for addressing those gaps effectively, drafting the strategy, and ensuring all the way along or at any points that you identify, having citizen engagement. And this is another way to make sure that the strategy is brought to life and carried forward in the community. So, why is it important? And so I'm speaking from the perspective of promoting food security, and in public health and in health in general, we promote food security because it's a prerequisite to healthy eating. So we can tell people to eat healthy, but if they're not able to access those foods that make them healthy, then it doesn't matter how much they know about eating healthy. So food security, and this is a really widely accepted, there's a lot of definitions out there of food security. This is a widely accepted one from the World Food Summit in 1996. So food security exists when all people at all times have physical and economic access to sufficient, safe, and nutritious food that meets their dietary needs and food preferences for an active and healthy life. And then we add to this, and this is another component of the definition of food security that's very commonly used, that a food secure community depends upon a sustainable food system that maximizes self-reliance and social justice. So these are two sort of additional elements when we talk about food security. And then there's four key components of food security when we talk about food security. So availability of food, and that's just the quantity of food. So that good food, it exists, it's out there, it's available for consumption. Stability of supply, so that food that's out there, it's gonna always be out there. It's not gonna be vulnerable to various disasters or conflicts. And that's where we get into concerns on Vancouver Island. We're an island. We're very vulnerable. If we were cut off in the event of a natural disaster or conflict, a widely used statistic that I've heard on the island is that we have roughly 3 days of food on our grocery store shelves. So we want to make sure there's some kind of stability in our supply, whether that means having more means of local production, whether that means having a really robust emergency preparedness strategy, just making sure that people are going to have that food available no matter what comes to pass. Accessibility of food, so this is where you get into physical and financial access and utilization of food. And this one I think should probably resonate a lot for the city of Parksville and the demographics of having a more older and aging population. Utilization is not just knowledge of how to prepare food, it's also physical ability to utilize it. And so when you get people getting more frail elderly, they're not able to reach things they used to reach, they're not able to open jars, they might have memory issues where they're not able to even safely use their kitchen. So it's considering how everybody's going to be able to use their food and what kinds of mechanisms are in place in your community to ensure that that's going to happen. This comes from a document from the Community Nutritionist Council of BC, and this was actually a foundational document for how food and food security got embedded into public health in BC, and this just kind of gives a nice overview of your different aspects of your food system, the different areas where you might see benefit, and at the center is an optimally nourished population. And so from the health perspective, it's really about getting healthy food into people. And again, I'm just going to revisit those 5 areas that I mentioned in a previous slide: health, environment, economy, social, cultural, and security. So these are areas of impact for your community. And I really thought this quote was relevant to this particular situation. So today it's at the municipal level that the socioeconomic and environmental problems associated with food insecurity become the most evident. So this is where it hits the ground and where these symptoms begin to appear. And so it's at the municipal level where new solutions are being developed and implemented. And I think back in 2006 when we started in the Health Authority promoting food security and promoting communities to do community food action plans and needs assessments, it was often at the grassroots level that these things were being initiated, but more and more we're seeing local government being the initiator of these things and being the sort of just the facilitator of helping to move some of these community food plans forward. So co-benefits of the community food strategy, and I'm talking about co-benefits, that's an approach that we're taking more and more in public health. So looking at initiatives that give us benefits, give us the most bang for our buck. So it doesn't have to be one single outcome. Maybe one initiative can have many, many benefits. And so this diagram kind of shows some co-benefits of if you were to look at a community food strategy for Parksville. So starting up with health, so with a food strategy, hopefully you're improving that aspect of food access, because you're going to want to look at both food access issues and that economic angle, and there's sort of the people in dire need, and then there's the industry that wants to grow and be supported. So there's sort of two sides to this. So increasing food access directly improves nutrition, and which in turn improves physical and mental health, which in turn reduces healthcare costs, improves human performance, improves personal resilience, all of which contribute to economic growth. Moving down to environment, so sustainable production of food, which is what we're looking toward, sustainable food system. Means we're going to have a cleaner environment. Means we might be able to mitigate some of our concerns around climate change, some of the potential impact of climate change. And we'll have more healthier, more productive ecosystems, which feeds back into food access and feeds back into physical health with a cleaner environment. Environmental health concerns can be addressed. And then economy. So the local food sector is going to hopefully benefit from this strategy. You're going to have more tourists, hopefully, being drawn to Parksville if you're focusing on that tourism element. Which in turn will lead to better livelihoods, a diversified economy, which in turn leads to disposable income and an improved tax base, which again ties back to economic growth. And then social and cultural benefits. So looking at empowerment through a lot of these community food initiatives targeted at lower income populations, higher risk populations. That's one of the sort of outcomes of those types of initiatives. Diversity and vibrancy, when we talk about cultural acceptability of food, First Nations, traditional foods and things like that, social connectedness. These are all benefits which all lead out to equity, which is just becoming more and more recognized as really important determinant of health. Minimizing the apparent gap between the highest and your lowest income earners in your community. Cultural understanding, social support networks, which they tie into health, they tie into this whole question of security when you talk about violence and crime in your community. Everything's tied together. And on that last line of security, climate change adaptation is a big one. As we have climate change, we have to look at the impact of that on our food system and being resilient to those impacts and impacts of other changes in our long-term future, changes in cost of fuel and food prices, and all of that. So why now? So it's always a good time to improve health in your community and to look at these various co-benefits that you can get out of a food strategy. But more importantly, you have already many tools at hand to help you begin. You have many policies in place already that can simply be integrated into a food policy. So it'd be a matter of starting with those policies that you already have and filling the gaps. And also, this is an issue that typically resonates with communities. So it could be a way of really enlivening some of those policies that you've already put into place in community, packaging them together within a food strategy that is has community engaged in it is a way to really get people to start taking action in community and just making those small lifestyle changes even. And grant money is available now, which is one of the things that I was asked to share. So there's an initiative through the Healthy Families BC Communities Initiative. This is the second round, and you might have seen the first round of this grant was announced last spring, and this is the second round of small grants available directly to local governments. So only local governments are able to apply to do things like developing a food strategy or other things that contribute to prevention of chronic disease and promote health. And in the first round, I can say that there were a number of communities across BC that were funded for work around food security and food security planning work. And I can share more information with that. I brought a printout of the information package, and the due date for that is in March. There's also other potential funding opportunities out there. The Real Estate Foundation sometimes funds these types of things. There's money available. And so this is just my references, which I don't expect. I can send these to Councillor Powell-Davidson, and she can share them if you're interested in doing more background reading. There's a lot of recent articles that have come out that can help you assess whether this is the right move for the city. So thank you.
All right, Annalisa, thank you very much. I'll open the floor to members of council if they have any questions. So I see a couple of hands. Go ahead, Councillor Lefebvre.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Annalisa, for your presentation. How important in a municipal food strategy is food production? And I ask that question because we permit spin gardening in Parksville. We have a policy, we have a bylaw that permits that. But within the boundaries of Parksville itself, none of our ALR lands are producing any food or any significant amount of food. And I don't know if, I mean, there's probably some folk that have gardens that are producing food for themselves. But in terms of food production to feed the population at large, there's none of that. But there is a local food grocery store that's going around to communities outside of our boundaries to sell food grown locally within the Oceanside area. So within the context of the city boundaries of Parksville, how important would food production be and food processing be to a strategy?
Well, I mean, what goes in, I mean, you're going to want to take a look at all of these things when you go to developing the strategy. As you can see, well, can you see it? Oh, okay. So as you can see, primary production, that growing of food, it's only one item on that list of the parts of the system. So you're going to want to, kind of equally consider all of these parts of your system. And so if you don't have a lot of primary production, you're going to want to evaluate if you want to encourage more primary production. And so if you do, then that would be, that decision of whether or not that would be a priority would be included in the strategy. And then if it was, you'd have steps in the strategy that would promote primary production. But you'd also want to look in that production phase. So where is the production happening that's feeding the city of Parksville? Because you have a vested interest in that. And you don't want to be in a situation in the future where your source of primary production is, is insecure or compromised in some way. So it is as important as your stakeholder group or whoever is involved in developing the strategy. It's as important as they decide what it is.
Follow up, Your Worship. Just a quick comment, and not a question really. I was talking to the executive director of the Chamber of Commerce a number of weeks ago. There is a company out of Salt Spring Island. They're growing a lot of food. I forget the individual's name, but I provided the information to the executive director in terms of looking within Parksville and other areas, because they've been very, very successful. I don't know if the executive director remembers the name, but I don't. And so that would be the kind of thing we'd look at in terms of what kind of production could we create within our own boundaries.
Yeah, definitely. You'd want to look to what's happening successfully in other areas that are similar to this area as far as the land base and the population and the climate.
1 second, Councillor Neufeld. I had Councillor Powell, and then we'll go to you.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you very much for your presentation. You mentioned that there was the first year were successes. Could you talk about the communities and what kind of strategies they came up with?
So the first year successes?
Yeah.
Oh, with the grants? I can't answer that question off the top of my head. I'd have to look through, but in looking through sort of I wasn't involved in awarding the grants, but I was on the receiving end of the information as to who received the grants, and I did see there were a number of local governments and First Nations communities are the other group that are eligible for these grants, and so there were a lot of collaborative planning efforts related to food security. So it might not have been named as a food strategy, but some of these other mechanisms, so food action plans or things along those lines. And I can find out more and share that information definitely to kind of inform that.
Thank you. I just have a follow-up question. Could you send that to one of our staff and then they could forward it to us,
Yeah,
if you don't
certainly.
mind?
Yeah.
The other thing is the grant money is just to develop a strategy.
So it would be, so you'd have to look, I'd suggest having a look at the application package because it is quite a broad, there's a very broad swath of things that are included in that could be eligible for that grant. And so the development of a food, kind of the generic development of a food strategy involving different partners within your community would certainly fall under something that would be eligible and is something that has been funded in the last round, well funded. And I think some of the key aspects of what they look for in these initiatives are connections with the health authority, connections with other community partners. The grant comes from a program that is focused on improving increasing recognition of health in local government, increasing initiatives and policies that support chronic disease prevention. And so food has been a really key one that has been applied for a lot across the province. And if you look at the Plan H website, if you Google Plan H, it's a new website launched recently, which is where the grant is situated. And it has a section on food security and what municipalities can do to be supported.
All right, Councillor Neufeld.
Thanks very much, Your Worship. And thank you very much, Annalisa, for your presentation. I guess halfway through, I started making notes as to what questions I wanted to ask you, and Councillor Lefebvre and Powell have already asked some of them. But as far as cost is concerned for this program, grant money is available, but in fact, what is that grant money used for? What are we going to be doing, and how would it, in fact, benefit the municipality? Because as Councillor Lefebvre has said, we're a very bound municipality, and my family actually grows squash and grows tomatoes and grows various things, and my wife is just having us put in some garden beds, raised garden. So we're doing things of this nature. But, as far as, you have something up as to how it is done, establish a mandate, but, who does it with respect to the municipality as opposed to are you expecting us as a council or as to address our staff and say we want this to be done? And I'm not sure what it's going to cost given the return that will be there. And so I'm wondering about our role in the Island Health's role in this as far as a facilitator, and to what degree are we trying to get the municipality involved, the public involved, we have some community gardens. They could in fact be expanded. There are also some private gardens which personally we are expanding ours. So I guess the question is, who does it? And there's something being done right now in Vancouver. Can you fill us in on what has in fact been occurring there and what their result has been?
Right. Okay. So I'll try to answer that question in a few different steps. So as far as who does it in general, and so I'm just here speaking kind of generally about food, the concept of a food strategy, how it might benefit Parksville, and it's certainly up to the city if they want to take this on, right? If you see this as something in your benefit to take on, and I've tried to sort of give an an overview of the benefits, and I can also provide some further information if you want to explore those potential benefits and what is the cost benefit that you would get out of entering into that. What I would say is that if there was a food strategy or food action plan of some kind developed for Parksville, its best bet for success is if it originates within the city, and if it is embedded within the city itself, because what they're showing in some recent articles and documents that have come out is that this is having these kinds of policies or policy documents and strategies and plans embedded within local government is really important to see these things through over the long term. And there's instances, and there's a really great paper that kind of gives an overview of different kinds of food policies and strategies and how they link with local government. And, there's instances of where the local government develops a strategy and owns the strategy and their staff are dedicated to implementing the strategy. There's instances where the local government initiates the development of the strategy, facilitates bringing in the stakeholders, kind of owns the strategy, but it's sort of there's joint responsibility amongst other stakeholders outside of the municipality, or there's instances where it's been developed in the community itself, and the community has the municipality has participated as one of many stakeholders, but it's not embedded. And what they found, or what appears to be the case, is when it's at least partially or fully embedded into the city, it's most successful. As for what's happening in Vancouver, it is sort of that hybrid model. It's the city owns the City of Vancouver food strategy. It is a great document to look at as a gold standard, and obviously it's a very different scale of resources and a very different landscape physically as far as looking at things like food production. But it is kind of nice to look at what's possible out of that strategy and how you might pull parts of that into a strategy for Parksville. And am I missing any components of that question?
Go ahead, but we should be wrapping up fairly soon to move on.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. What has been, excuse me, but can you tell me what the benefit has been as far as Vancouver is concerned? Has there been any analysis done as to how they're out of that document that has been produced?
Well, sorry.
Go ahead.
Sorry. Their document only was just produced in just this year, and so I don't think they've done any evaluation yet. So I don't think I can answer that question, but I know that it's been a much celebrated document. Whether or not it actually proves to have legs on the ground, I can't answer that, unfortunately.
I see Councillor Morrison with his hands up, and then why don't we make that the last question? Thanks.
More of a statement than a question. Is kind of trying to wrap my head around what we'd actually end up with in the city of Parksville, seeing as we don't have a lot of food production, very minimal kind of hobby farms. The ALR land we have isn't being used. To have a strategy, Lisa, that covers everything from production to making sure people can open jars of food. I can't wrap my head around in the economic state that we keep going over budget discussions, the money expended to create a strategy like this, what it's going to get us. So at this point, I can't see the benefit outweighs the costs of having a strategy like this for the city.
Well, and as far as the cost and the cost of running programs that support people for food access, it wouldn't be through developing the strategy. It wouldn't be the city that takes on the role of running all of those programs. It's sort of a facilitative document almost to help to take a look at what are all of the resources available in the community, what are all the NGOs doing to support food access, your programs like Meals on Wheels, things like that are out there. You want to look outside of just this question of production, because obviously production is very important, But you just want, what you want to think about is where is our food coming from, and are we comfortable with, you know, the security of that? Can we ensure that our people long term are going to be able to access healthy food? And so when you're looking at the benefits, like the benefits of any initiative that is a health promotion initiative, at least narrowly, those are spin-off benefits you're going to see in terms of health status of your population and what that results in as far as productivity and reducing, you know, burdens on the medical system. And then the other side of it, because it is looking at both those things, such as emergency food access and addressing those people in your community that are sort of struggling to make ends meet and are going to the food bank and are just eating bread or carbohydrates only for every meal, what does that impact on their mental health? Like, we know that impacts your cognitive ability. So when you have children growing up on that kind of diet, we know that's going to have an outcome on how productive they are as adults. And so it's really taking that long-term view, as we do with a lot of public health, population health issues, and looking at what that benefit's going to be, in addition to the benefit of being able to have food in an emergency situation, being able to address your local demand for food, in addition to sort of that more the higher end of the food system, where you're looking at economic development opportunities and business opportunities, small business opportunities related to the food industry, which is just a booming thing right now, and it's something that you would likely want to take advantage of if you're looking at you know, sort of different niche opportunities for small local businesses. So just those are some of the benefits, and I wish I could put a dollar amount on that, and I can work on getting some dollar figures for you if that's something that you're interested in. I'm sure there's some articles out there that do make that connection, but for now, just sort of qualitatively, those are the kinds of benefits you'd be looking at, and so putting a dollar value on that is something that you might want to pursue.
All right. So, Mr. Manson, you seem to want to make a comment, or through your microphone there, Mr. Manson? Thank you.
More of an observation and I suppose a comment at the same time. In looking at the parts of the food system that are itemized there, none of those are really things that, as a municipality, we have control over. And I think at the same time, the city has already undertaken quite a few initiatives to promote food production, food security, but we haven't done it in any set of formalized guidelines or whatever. But a lot of decisions that council has made, such as the community garden, the local gardens, even the decision with regards to the Erminskin property to keep it as agricultural land, are all decisions that council has made for food security. But we don't have anything actually formalized. To put together some sort of a formalized plan at the scope that seems to be discussed right now, in essence, you're looking at, as an analogy, a mini OCP, and all of the consultation, the community groups with relation to that, to actually formalize it, which could be quite costly. I know the city of Vancouver had three people working full-time for several years to develop theirs. The city of Nanaimo is currently working on one for their city. It's not completed yet, and they have one person working full-time. So it is no small undertaking. And as I said before, most of the items there, or all of those, we don't really have jurisdiction over. Health is a provincial responsibility. This, in essence, if we take this on, would be us accepting another provincial download. Not saying that it's not a good thing to do, but we're certainly not geared to do it, and right now we don't have the resources to do it.
All right. All right. I will expect, I'm sure, in the future more discussion on this topic, as I think I'm hearing some counter opinions across the table. And I want to take this opportunity to really thank you, Ms. Blake, for taking the time to be with us here this evening and providing us this information. And I will look forward to the additional info that you suggest you can provide as well. And have yourself a great evening. Thank you again for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to move to our second of the two delegations we have this evening, and this is from the Parksville and District Chamber of Commerce regarding the annual fee-for-service and visitor center report. And I see President Rivers and Mr. Burden. I take it you'll both be making this presentation.
Just going to accept the buttons.
All right, fantastic. You know the drill. When you're ready, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Your Worship and Council. It's our pleasure tonight to give you an update on what we've been doing around the Visitor Information Center, and look forward to questions afterward. To start with, as you know, any and all information about Oceanside is available at the Visitor Information Center. As far as services to local residents, we receive and service requests from local event and convention planners for local information for their attendees. We provide information by phone, through our website, and at the center about local business and government services and community events. We are a drop-off and pick-up location for newspapers, magazines, and telephone books. We provide clean public washrooms. We provide bus and ferry schedules. Since BC Ferries stopped providing printed schedules, that request has really increased. Our gift shop is small but popular and provides local artists and authors with a venue to sell their work. In addition, we sell maps, Parksville clothing, postcards, and stamps. For residents looking at planning a trip, we provide information about on-island and off-island destinations. Services to visitors include accommodation for all types, and during peak periods, we are able to provide occupancy information. We have a combination of print material and a computer screen dedicated to providing a visual of available accommodations in the region, and a dedicated phone programmed with phone numbers that allow visitors to book their accommodation from the center. We provide information on all facets of the community, including arts, entertainment, events, recreation, and activities. We have created a daily events list, a restaurant guide, a hiking guide, golf info, birding guides, daily tide information, fishing and weather information, and a printed guide for a design tour of the region. Our public washrooms are always very clean. Maps, bus, and ferry schedules are always in demand, and our knowledgeable staff are well-versed in our local activities. The continued presence of food trucks has been popular with visitors and local residents alike. Our staffing at the center is a Visitor Information Center manager, volunteers, summer students, and chamber staff that step up to assist during peak times. All paid staff and volunteers are trained as visitor counselors using a program designed by Tourism BC and delivered by Patty Lee, our visitor center manager. This year, Patty also helped to train the staff at the Qualicum Beach Visitor Information Center as well as the Port Alberta Visitor Information Center. This includes training. The training includes a familiarity tour of the area's accommodations and activities. We maintained our commitment to a student hiring program which provides students with excellent training and revenue to use to continue their post-secondary education. This year, with the assistance of MP Dr. James Lunny, we received federal funding which allowed to hire 4 students. We are very thankful we have an excellent contingent of volunteers to maintain high service levels and allow for flexibility in staffing. Financially, we continue to develop revenue generation concepts to provide visitors with purchasing opportunities and provide businesses with advertising opportunities. We are currently selling advertising for 3 publications. The Wedding Guide is currently in its 4th year. The Home and Lifestyle Guide is in its 2nd year. Pet Talk is about to be introduced this year, and it will be a guide that will deliver information on pet daycare, pet services, off-leash dog parks, veterinarians, grooming, etc. So I know in the accommodation industry people are always looking for information on where they can do things for their pets, so this is going to be a great thing. Expenses continue to increase. However, with our revenue generation programs, we have again reduced the operating deficit or chamber member contribution to just over $7,000. This is a positive pattern. In 2011, the deficit was $22,000, and in 2012, deficit was $16,000. So we continue to decrease that deficit. Who are our customers? Local residents and visitors make use of the visitor center. Our numbers were down slightly in 2013. While Europeans do make up a significant number of the visitors, they are increasing year by year. We continued the tracking advertising campaign on BC ferries to draw traffic from ferry travelers going up island, offering a reusable Parksville shopping bag to visitors bringing a coupon to the visitor center. We gave away roughly 300 bags as part of this program. We placed 2,000 rack cards on BC ferries, providing a 15% return. This is a 5% increase over last year. Finally, but not last but not least, while it is not necessarily a part of the Visitor Center program, we are especially proud of the latest addition to the Visitor Center, solar technology. The panels installed on the Visitor Center roof are a dual-purpose panel utilizing the infrared radiation from the sun to help the refrigerant in the heat pump and using photovoltaic, Kim asked me to use all these big words, I don't know.
Good stuff.
Photovoltaic cells to capture the sunlight and transform it into electricity. The technology to combine these two elements was developed by a local company, Solaris Manufacturing, and installed by Recap Power, another local company. Solaris was featured in both the International Resource Journal and the Canadian Business Journal, and the Chamber had an opportunity to place a business attention ad with the article.
The picture is the most important part there.
That's right. Yeah. Finally, in addition to proclaiming to the world that we are a high-tech community who are demonstrating the need to lower our energy footprint, we will be including in next year's report some numbers representing the energy savings we have achieved through this program.
And so concludes the presentation. Thank you. So I will open the floor to members of council if you have any questions or if anyone is prepared to make a motion. Right after this delegation, we do have a recommendation there to review. Okay, so why don't we do that? And you stay right there because we'll have a discussion here and I'll even incorporate you into it if necessary. So Councillor Greer is moving and Councillor Powell is seconding essentially the motion which follows the delegation, which is essentially to receive this report and to bring about a 214 fee-for-service agreement that is almost identical to past years. There's a 1% increase, I think it's 400 and change, and another slight change in the report that you've all read. So with that on the floor, is there any discussion or questions? So go ahead, Councillor Powell.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you very much for your presentation. I just noticed on the numbers it was 1%, I think, from Asia and Australia. And I know that one of the initiatives is the entrepreneurs, the entrepreneurial for business is what we're trying to attract, and part of the what was identified was Asian people. And so do you see that as increasing, like to work in conjunction with the Chamber of Commerce and the Tourist Information Center? You see those numbers going up?
Tim, I'll let you speak to that.
There's a bunch of things that come into play there. We've got several different initiatives going on. One is the attraction of the lifestyle entrepreneur, which really doesn't have a whole lot. We're certainly not targeting Asia in that regard. The one that I think you're referring to is something that we've been doing with regard to succession planning for businesses, which is attending and making presentation to the provincial nominee program. So the provincial nominee program is a program that accelerates the immigration process to people who are prepared to buy local businesses and operate those businesses, and there's some rules and regulations around the business has to have been in existence for 5 years, there's some values attached, etc. So we have actually had some success in that regard. We've got a couple of PNP immigrants living in our community and operating businesses, and I interviewed another one 2 weeks ago. I know that there's been a couple that have been exploring some opportunities in Qualicum Beach, so that program is actually starting to bear some fruit. As far as the increase in Asian visitors, Robin can probably speak better than I can to the PARCEL Qualicum Beach Tourism Association initiative to target some advertising initiatives. We also have to consider the new ownership of the hotel that's going to be attached to the convention center in Nanaimo. So, there's certainly some things on the horizon that are going to impact that, but I think it's early yet to try and measure that. But I'll let you speak to the PQBTA initiative, seeing as how you know.
Basically, the PQBTA initiative is it's going to be a pilot project that is going to do some advertising towards the Chinese market on the Lower Mainland, with the thought that if we can target the Lower Mainland Asian market, that will almost automatically target the mainland China resident. So what we're looking at doing is advertising websites, so forth, in a language that they can understand, and then have a few of the accommodation providers provide all of their information as well in Mandarin or Cantonese or one of those languages, so that when the customer comes to the area, they will actually be able to read things like the welcome packages and the rules and regulations at the accommodation and so forth, and just to make sure that they understand their welcome in the community. And we're hoping that will sort of surefire a way into that program and hopefully bring that Asian market in, and eventually they come to visit, they come to live.
Further comments, questions? Go ahead, Councillor Neufeld.
Thanks very much, Your Worship. Actually, I had a couple of questions about your presentation, and if you would address them rather than going into the motion. Is this the
I thought I'd just combine the two because I'm being creative this evening. So go ahead and ask your question.
One of the things that I've come across any number of times when I've been traveling, particularly in Europe and elsewhere, quite often the visitor center will charge an accommodation fee as far as a reservation is concerned. Do we do anything of that? It's not something that it would be saleable if, or would you in fact not see it as being something that's worthwhile, or the motel or hotel would not be willing to pay it, or what is our position on that, please?
Most of the accommodation sector are our members, and part of the benefit of being a Chamber of Commerce and operating a visitor center is to provide that business connection in the community as well. We have had some discussion with the golf courses about becoming a concierge booking service, and we would charge for that. There's some technical issues that we have to resolve there with regard to finding a way to use the same software for booking, but we've been having some discussion and we're working on that. I don't see it happening immediately, but I think it'll happen. What we offer for accommodations is speed dial to all of the accommodations in the region, visuals so that people can make a choice. We try not to recommend. We certainly want to. We provide people with an array based on their desires. If they're looking for something on the waterfront and a high-end hotel, then we will provide them with the information on those resorts and hotels that fit that description. If they're looking for a bed and a lamp, then we'll provide them with a description of places that offer that. So because they're our members, we think it's important that be part of the service. In looking for the revenue generation projects, we came up with 3 criteria. It has to be beneficial to the visitor, it has to be beneficial to the visitor center and the chamber operation, and we don't want to compete with local business.
Follow-up, go ahead.
Yes, please, if you would. Thank you, Your Worship. One of the things that you said, the deficit is declining, but still the deficit is such that no matter what happens, you continue to run in deficit. You're gonna go broke. You have 500.
We're not going to go broke.
You're not going to go broke. Okay. How do you manage that deficit on an annual basis? I mean, you've gone through at least you've gone up to or over 500 memberships, and so I mean that's substantial, and you're getting a significant fee out of that. And you will in fact, you're asking us for a fee for service, and I fully appreciate that the work that you do for us. But how do you cover your deficit?
We have a number of other operations that generate revenue through the chamber. And we believe that based on the benefit to the business community that the visitor center offers, that our members ultimately benefit for that $7,000 investment. Obviously, we're trying to get that down, and you can see that we've done, some significant, more on the revenue side than on the expense side, a little bit on the expense side, but we've made some changes so that we can reduce that contribution from the membership. We're running, right now, we're running events, we're running a variety of fundraising programs, we've got membership revenues. So, there's other things. That picture there, that snapshot there was simply visitor center revenues and visitor center expenses. We are able to separate most of that out from our overall budget. We're not going to go broke.
Very good. Councillor Lefebvre.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you, Shauna and Kim, for your presentation. Well, obviously,
Robin.
Robin.
Mark.
Obviously, I'm impressed by the photovoltaic, as well as everything else. But the photovoltaic has risen to the top for me. Are you planning on keeping a report on what your energy savings will be with regards to the operation of the center? And this, I would be interested in hearing that as time goes by, because we can probably start.
Yeah, we've been advised by the manufacturer that our heating costs will drop by 55%, and that we will be producing, I think, somewhere in the neighborhood of 1,700 kilowatt hours of electricity over the course of a month. I'm going to monitor that. Okay. Now, this morning I went into work, and the production rate was very, very low. It wasn't that kind of a day. When we first flipped the switch in the fall, we were booming along at 1,200 kilowatt hours. It was pretty good. So yes, I'm going to track it.
Thank you.
And
my other question is, I attended the mainland China reception at the Union of British Columbia Municipalities back in September, and I had the opportunity to talk to a few members of the council that were there from China. In the conversations were very, very stilted, because their English and my Mandarin is nil. I think I know one word in Mandarin, but it was a kind of a stilted conversation. Are we planning at some point in time? Do we have anybody in the area that speaks Mandarin that we can use when and if the time comes?
Yeah, my
because
son
I think
and
that's going to be
daughter-in-law.
very important. Pardon me?
I said my son and daughter-in-law.
Okay, so that's him. But would you think that speaking Mandarin would be an asset at some point in time for the area?
I think having maybe some phrases to be polite would be an asset, but it's a very difficult language to learn. And the people that I've worked with and spoken with that through the provincial nominee program that are coming here from China, and they're coming from all countries, not just China, but the ones that I speak with, it's not a requirement for them. The question is more, where can I learn English, rather than why haven't you tried to learn my language? Again, I think having some sort of availability of translators and that sort of thing is a good idea, but it's not going to slow down people coming here.
Final question, Your Honor, Your Worship. What about brochures in Mandarin? Not lengthy brochures, but just sort of highlight things that's common, that every day, where this is, where that is, where the beach is.
I think that's something that PQBTA is hoping to put forward, and certainly would work with the Visitor Information Center and the Chamber of Commerce regarding that.
Thank you, Robin.
You see how easy photovoltaic rolls off of Councillor Lefebvre's tongue? It's because he says it every day, at least once. Thank you very much. So, do we have any further questions of our presenters before we go back to the motion? Go ahead, Councillor Greer.
Thank you, Your Worship. I spent a couple of years talking to the Chinese consulate and exporters about Confederation homes. They were log square homes with dovetail corners and type of thing. I found that they all spoke really good English, and we could communicate very well. However, it's a long process to get through to China to really get anything to happen. And but I think what I wanted to say was, I think those people, if you went to see those people, they can speak really good English, and they have all the contacts, so you could go direct through them quite easily. So yeah, thanks.
Okay, so we have no further questions for our presenters. Then we'll get back to the motion itself, which is 9A, and of course you know what that is. It's there on your agenda. And is there any discussion amongst council on that motion? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? That's carried unanimously. Thank you very much, and we'll look forward to another productive year, and we'll be very interested to see the energy savings that you achieve with those panels and other efforts. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right, so we are now going to move on to report 9B, and that is from Mr. Metcalf. And could you give us the background with respect to the Rathtrevor Beach Provincial Park entrance sign and maintenance agreement?
Thank you, Your Worship. This report introduces for Council's consideration a request received from BC Parks to install and maintain an entrance sign for Rathtrevor Beach Provincial Park. The sign would be installed on an unused triangular portion of City Road right-of-way adjacent to Island Highway and Resort Way. Along with the sign, other improvements include landscaping and the placement of rocks to prevent vehicle access to the area. Under the terms of the agreement, the cost to install and maintain the works will be the responsibility of the province. The design proposal and ongoing maintenance obligations are outlined in the maintenance agreement. In the attached report, subject to Council's authorization for the City to enter in the agreement, the works would be proposed to start before the end of the year. And the recommendation is as per the report.
So we have a recommendation that needs to be turned into a motion moved by Councillor Neufeld, seconded by Councillor Powell-Davidson. Any discussion on that motion? Councillor Lefebvre.
Thank you, Worship. Just a very quick question, and I think I know the answer, but I feel I have to ask it anyway. When I looked at the sign that's in the presentation, that's what they're adamant about. They want that color, which is not the same color as the ones we have. It's a reddish color, whereas ours is a darker color. But I guess that's what they want. It's a provincial sign, so we're agreeing to that.
Go ahead, Mr. Metcalf.
Through Your Worship, yes, that is the color they want. They did incorporate a number of design elements that are consistent with other signs that we have in the area. So those parts were incorporated in the design.
That struck me right away, as there's some core elements that are consistent, and I think it'll fit in nicely. But yeah, so we met them a good distance of the way. So further discussion? Go ahead, Councillor Powell-Davidson.
Thank you, Your Worship. I've gone through this report, and I must say it's about time. I mean, there's that little beat-up piece of property in front that sort of spearheads or leads up the resort district and one of the most popular provincial parks in the province. So I'm really pleased to see this coming forward. I was also pleased to see that it appears as though they've employed a local company to do the design work. Am I reading that correctly? Yeah, so that's great.
All right, so without further ado then, let's make it really great. All those in favor? Opposed? And that's carried. Thank you. Moving on to report 9C, and this is from Mr. Figuera. And could you give us the background with respect to the professional services for storm master plan and sewer master plan updates? Thank you.
If I may, Your Worship, the staff are seeking authorization from Council to award the professional services for the 1998 storm master plan and the 1996 sewer master plan in the amount of $232,224 to Coors and Associates Engineering Limited. These plans are currently out of date and need to accommodate the recent OCP update. The plans are required to do a number of things, and some of the more significant ones are assess land development applications, set future capital works programs, do the budgeting in terms of capital and operational. They're required to assist the maintenance of our systems. Some new features that we're introducing, some of the major ones are addressing climate change, and another would be the impacts of stormwater on environmentally sensitive areas, and that's to do with making sure that there's sufficient features in place to ensure that we don't cause environmental damage at our storm outfalls in our sensitive areas, which would, for example, would be the Englishman estuary. This is a good example of that. There's sufficient funding identified for this work in the approved 2013 budget, and the staff recommendation is as per the report.
So we do have that recommendation before us. Do we have a mover and a seconder? Moved by Councillor Lefebvre, seconded by Councillor Greer. Any discussion? Councillor Lefebvre.
Thank you, Worship. Very, very briefly, as a member of AWS, I was contacted by the Mid-Vancouver Island Habitat Enhancement Society, and I attended a meeting earlier this summer. I've given I was going to bring this up under new business, but I'll do it now. I've given the Director of Engineering a copy of their latest report, which is the Englishman River Habitat Status Report, which is, it's all water, so it's directly related. And I had a discussion with the Mid-Vancouver Island Habitat Enhancement Society folk on the issue of integrated rainwater and groundwater management. And I know that when we talk about stormwater, briefly talking with the Director of Engineering, and I've also talked to our CAO, I think it becomes very, very important that we look at things like rain gardens and that sort of thing. I know that climate change and we have to protect the sensitive areas, but in those non-sensitive areas where we can use, I think they're called whatever those swales are, and the rain gardens and that sort of thing, that's the kind of thing that the Mid-Vancouver Island Habitat Enhancement Society are proposing. And I would hope that that's something that you can sit down with that group and get some recommendations from them, because they work very hard. They're a very good group. They're calm and they're cool and they're collected and they do a wonderful job. They've got a lot of volunteers. So I would hope that that part of the stormwater is taken into consideration, and we simply don't let all the stormwater go into the ocean, that we try to retain some so that we can replenish some of the underground aquifers. I'm fully supportive.
Yeah, I think that those types of things, such as bioswales, are already being discussed as some of those elements that could help manage outflows into environmentally sensitive areas, etc. And you're right, we do have a big responsibility. We've got one of the largest, if not the largest, estuaries on the eastern shores of Vancouver Island, and it's surrounded by urban development. Most of it is ours, not all. And we do have a number of outflows that flow down into the estuary, and thank you to the work of the volunteers, or in thanks to the work of the volunteers and staff, we're monitoring that and doing more and more all the time to try and mitigate any negatives associated with that. Go ahead, Councillor Greer.
Thank you, Worship. Just a quick question. We're approving the $232,000, I take it. But on page 40, we have another couple of items here, which comes to $67,000. Is that money that was carried over? It's for the flow monitoring estimate, one flow monitor, modeling software estimate.
Do you want to touch on that, Mr. Figueroa?
If I may, Your Worship.
Page 40.
Yes, that all that funding, there was $300,000 that was allocated for the project, and so all that additional flow monitoring required. We are purchasing one flow monitor for our own future use, and we're getting trained on it, so that there are going to be some situations where we can do our own monitoring. However, the extensive monitoring required for this particular study, we just don't have the capacity for that. There's also modeling software in there. Our current modeling software is somewhat out of date, and there's some features on some of the new software that we could utilize. It interacts better with our GIS system data, so that's why that's in there. But the full cost has been accounted for, and in the $300,000 that's been allocated for this work.
So we've allocated it, but we're just approving the $232,000.
That's right.
Tonight.
You're approving the contract, in effect.
Yeah, we're approving I understand that. But what about the $67,000?
Approved in the budget.
It's approved.
So that's a carryover type thing.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
We discussed this, and this would have been back in late 2012 as part of the 2013. Yes, very long time ago for some of us, Councillor Greer. All right, no further discussion. We do have the motion before us. Are you ready for a vote? All in favor, opposed, and that's carried unanimously. Thank you. All right, moving on to the next report, and this is from Mrs. Comis, and that is in regard to the 2014 meeting dates that we also have to look forward to here in the next upcoming year.
Yes, Your Worship, by statute we are required to set the council meeting dates for the coming year, and that is the purpose of this report. There are 3 dates that staff are recommending council meetings be canceled. The first is the first meeting in January, January 6th, that because of the holiday season, agenda preparation, there aren't enough reports or staff to provide the agenda preparation for that meeting. In June, the first meeting on June 2nd conflicts with the Federation of Canadian Municipalities annual conference. And in November, November 17th is the Monday following the election. And given the work requirements for staff up to that particular date, again, we are recommending that meeting date also be canceled.
All right, so we have a recommendation to that effect before us. Do we have a mover and a seconder? Moved by Councillor Morrison, seconded by Councillor Powell. Any discussion? Go ahead, Councillor Morrison.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just questioning the June 2nd. I don't know, last year we canceled because all of us were at FCM. It was in Vancouver. Is it normal to cancel it? Only 2 of either yourself and one councillor would be leaving for FCM? Is it just based on if one's sick, then we don't have a quorum?
Well, I assumed it was because it's no fun without me being at the table. But go ahead, Madam Comis.
It is council standard practice to cancel that meeting, Your Worship, and given that there could be others away at that time, unforeseen circumstances could come up. At the time that we actually planned the schedule for 2013, we were unaware that all of council was going to be going to happened after the fact, so any number of things that can come up cause issues at that time.
Of course, as always, although it is important to make sure the public's aware of our schedule, there is obviously opportunity to add dates if necessary, as we do from time to time with the appropriate notice. Any further discussion on this? All in favor? Opposed? And that's carried. Thank you. All right, moving on, and this is another report, Report 9E, and this time we're going to be asking Councillor Greer, and this is probably the last report for the purpose that we're going to be discussing tonight, which is our Citizens Advisory Committee. If you could give us the background, Councillor Greer, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Your Worship. Well, we've had several meetings, and this was recommended last week. You've got all the results of that recommendation in front of you, but there has been one change. Jim Banks, who was agreeable to everything on the day of the meeting, I think the next day emailed us and said that he had second thoughts on the parking meters on the beach, yard sale permits, and privatization of sale of the community and conference center. So just keep that in mind, that we did have Jim Banks, who had second thoughts on those 3 items. And they come under, of course, the alternate revenue sources. Just a couple of things on the marijuana, and I know you've got a lot of stuff in front of you, but a couple of points that I'd like to make. Since the ministry, and this report was done by Stephanie Weir, by the way, who does a tremendous job and a great amount of research, and this is pretty well all of her report. But since the ministry made this announcement in June, 171 parties have now applied to become licensed producers of these applications. 40 are from individuals, 131 are from corporations, and I think that's rather impressive considering the short period of time it's been underway, although some say it's been underway longer than what it was mentioned through the federal government. The old system is also a costly one, roughly $13.8 million a year to administer. And that's one reason the federal government's getting out of it, because they found that it was a nightmare to control all the licensing, considering that most of the people were growing their own marijuana anyways. And the fact also is that their recommendation, of course, is to sell it. Previous federal price per gram, which resulted in Ottawa losing roughly $5 million a year, was $5, and this does not cover the costs of producing this marijuana. Price per gram being advertised by the first licensed producer is $9 to $12, and this is what we had a long debate about. If the city was to get involved in any way, shape, or form, or anyone for that matter in this area, considering the amount of great marijuana that's being sold around this area, I'm sure they'd be hard-pressed to get $9 or $12 a gram when you can buy it on the street for a nickel a pack or whatever. So those are some of the big considerations. And so as numbers and costs amount, Ottawa is getting out of this game switching from middleman to regulator. They just want to regulate it because they know it's a losing proposition for them. And they're not the ideal people to be in it anyways. Health Canada is placing no limits on the number of these new capital-intensive facilities. So as many people as want to apply, they're willing, of course, to give out licenses at that price. So, so of course, the recommendation, you know, is that it's Council Advisory Committee requests the City of Parksville decline any future request to be involved in a medical marijuana partnership. So we're certainly not probably against the marijuana, somebody coming in and doing it, but it's, according to our research, it's a no-brainer for the cities to get involved financially. The casino development recommendation...
let me stop you there, Councillor Gray. Shall we do it one at a time? And then we'll have a discussion on the alternative revenue sources, because I'd really like to hear from Council on some of those concepts.
Okay.
So with that, we do have a recommendation before us, and this is specifically E1, which is medical marijuana production and partnership, which ultimately, as you all see, Council really talks about two things. One is to move forward with a review of our zoning and various policies, and then the other is, although I understand the intent, it is something that it's very hard. You can't pass a recommendation to bind the future hands of a council or another council, but you can certainly express it, I suppose. Is there someone that wishes to move that recommendation? You'll move it as chair. All right, so moved by Councillor Greer, seconded by Councillor Neufeld. Discussion on the motion. Go ahead, Councillor Lefebvre.
I was under the impression that these were being put forward to be simply received. Are we voting on whether to accept these recommendations? Because, for example, the first recommendation is city bylaws, including business licenses, blah, blah, blah. That's superfluous because...
it's just being received.
Pardon me?
It's just being received.
Oh,
I asked the committee if they wanted me to put a motion through. And
just to receive it for information.
That's right.
Not
it's our recommendation.
This wouldn't become, as the mayor has just said, this wouldn't become binding on this council or any other council.
No, it's our recommendation.
Okay,
I asked them whether they wanted to put a motion through for that. And
so forgetting about the involvement in medical marijuana partnership.
In that case, let me just back us up a little bit. I misread this report, but if indeed this is just for receipt, then what we would need to do is rescind that, and I would need the permission of the mover and the seconder to simply rescind that, because what you moved and seconded was actually converting this recommendation into a motion for council, right? So are you okay to rescind that?
It just says here to the advisory committee recommendations.
Okay, and that's fine. So that was not your intent to move that as a motion. You simply want to receive these reports?
Just to receive the report,
okay.
Because these are all just debatable points.
Yeah, absolutely, and we can certainly have a debate. I see staff are confused here, which has thrown me off too. Okay, so just in that case...
Maybe you should hear from Amanda. You're looking at me. You're looking at me as if I've said something wrong. Well, do you recall when I asked them whether they...
Why don't we make this official, and I'll go ahead and ask you if you want to use the microphone, and you can clarify with... Okay. We were under the impression that these were motions to come forward. They're simply to receive, right? Okay.
Well, yeah, because...
One sec. I just want to get us back to square one.
Because we have three things here on the table.
Right.
And the medical marijuana could definitely be a motion. The others, of course, well, the second one could be a motion, but the alternative revenue sources are up for debate.
That's right, and that's how it's broken down in the package.
Okay.
So this was actually broken down in the package as though this were to be converted into a motion on medical marijuana, on casino development, and then simply to receive on alternative revenue sources,
That's
and
right.
we could discuss that. So
That's
we're
right.
clear on that?
Yep.
We're clear on that, Councillor Lefebvre? Because you're seconding a motion.
Simply to receive the report.
No, you're seconding a motion that city bylaws, including business licensing, fees, zoning, and everything else that's stated in that recommendation is going to be...
I'll withdraw my support. I'd be in favor of receiving the report, but I think that this is premature. My comment on the first part of the marijuana thing is that the first paragraph...
We have to stop there, because if you're not prepared to make
I'm not
that
prepared.
motion-
I'm not prepared.
Go ahead, Mrs. Comas. Get us out of this mess, please.
Okay, Your Worship, the committee made 2 recommendations and put forward 1 topic for discussion. On the first item, Councillor Greer moved and Councillor Neufeld seconded that the recommendation with respect to medical marijuana be adopted. So that is what you are voting on right now, is that motion that is in your package and in the agenda, that city bylaws, including business licensing, fees, zoning, and building regulations, be reviewed and updated if necessary in preparation for the new Health Canada rules and regulations coming into effect April 2014, and that the Council Advisory Committee request the City of Parksville decline any future requests to be involved in a medical marijuana partnership. With respect to that recommendation, Council cannot tie the hands of a future Council. So if this particular Council wants to adopt that resolution, then they can do so, but on the understanding that in the future that recommendation could be changed by a future Council, or even this Council if you so desire. That is not going to be written in stone when you adopt that. That is for this particular moment in time.
So as I suggest, it's an expression. It isn't necessarily a direction. But, and I'm sorry, I forgot it was Councillor Neufeld that seconded it. When you spoke first to it, it confused me. So you do have that recommendation on the floor as a motion. Gentlemen, you're okay with that? Okay, so on that motion then, we'll discuss that specifically. And I see Councillor Powell-Davidson, and I'll get around the table here.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just need a point of clarification. What I'm confused about is this recommendation. It says that we decline any request to be involved in a medical marijuana partnership. I guess I'm not very clear on what medical marijuana partnership means to the City of Parksville, because I was under the understanding that if the federal government decides that we're going to have a medical marijuana grow operation here in Parksville, we're going to have one. So can somebody explain to me how we can decline being
I can
in a
do
partnership?
that, just in basic terms. So I think the intent here is that, for instance, I've made the suggestion, if we were so inclined, if Council were supportive of, we could, for instance, through, let's say, an RFP, request for proposal, put out there that we would be prepared to partner with a company, a private sector company, that is interested in establishing a business in this new industry. In other words, whether it's research and development, growing, etc. That is something that would only occur if Council were to actually provide, some sort of a direction to go ahead and do something like an RFP. Or a company could come to us, I suppose, and request something. Again, that would be Council that would have to review that and decide it. The rest of that motion really is very straightforward. I think it's happening in almost every municipality right now, which is simply to make sure we have the right things in place should companies come forward and simply want to locate within your community. Whether they're associated with the city or not is immaterial. It's just located. So those are the 2 aspects. Again, though, as Madam Comas has said, and as I referred to earlier, because you can't bind any future decisions, that second portion is more of an expression and a direction, which is the that portion of that motion. Okay?
I'm sorry, what was the last part you just said? That's what I'm getting confused
And
about.
that the Council Advisory Committee requests the City of Parksville decline any future request to be involved in a medical marijuana partnership is an expression, because you can't ultimately bind our hands in a future context.
But does a partnership include the federal government?
Federal government really acts as a regulator in this particular case.
you're looking at a private company coming into town and us taking part financially with it.
It's just a potential idea. It's not that a company's knocking on our door right now saying they necessarily want a partnership, but as one concept, that's all. More importantly, we need to make sure that our zoning is in line with the changes that are occurring, because we can't actually prohibit this from happening within our community. Although I did note in the report that it appears Abbotsford is trying to do just that. I don't know the details. Maybe they're challenging some of the federal rules, but ultimately, we want to make sure, I think, to accommodate in the way that we feel would best fit in our community this potential industrial use. So that's really the first portion of that. And then the second is, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, Councillor Greer, but I get the impression then from the committee they didn't feel a public-private partnership would be a way to go. That's right. As a mechanism, right. Yeah. If we were to so choose to do so. Okay, very good. So further discussion on this particular motion? Go ahead, Councillor Lefebvre.
Well, first of all, Your Worship, I'd like to thank the committee for the work that they've done. They've obviously worked very hard. In the first paragraph on the first recommendation, I consider that to be almost, what's the word I'm looking for, superfluous. Simply because I said it before and I'll say it again, we have no say. This is the federal government and the provincial government are going to allow the growing of marijuana on ALR lands and on farmland. That's a given. We have no say in that. If somebody wants to come and do it in our community on ALR lands, and what our staff, from what I know, because the RDN electoral area has just passed a new bylaw regarding where marijuana can be grown. That was done, I believe, at the last board meeting. So our staff are presently working, unless I'm mistaken, our staff are working on a bylaw for this very item, in terms of where we can grow, where medical marijuana can be grown, and what are the limitations. So I consider that to be superfluous. And in the other portion of the recommendation, I would simply don't want to tie my hands or the hands of future councils, and I think that we should explore. I think that it's worthwhile exploring from a potential revenue point of view, because it is going to be strictly regulated. So if there's an opportunity to make some revenue from this, so be it. So I won't be supporting, although I'm thankful for the work that's been done, I won't be supporting the entire recommendation.
Okay, did you want to make an amendment to that recommendation? I mean, you could do that as an option.
I said it earlier, I would think that this should be submitted for a receipt for information, and we can deal with it later on. I don't see why it has to be a motion that has to be passed in the way it's worded tonight. I would gladly accept it and receive it for information.
All right, thank you. Councillor Powell.
Thank you, Worship. I have the similar issues as Councillor Lefebvre, and it seems to me the last time we had this discussion before it went back to the committee was that if we decided, if Parksville or the City Council decided we were going to be in partnership, it was supposed to go out to a referendum to see how the people in the community feel. And so I'm sort of surprised that this last piece is in the motion. And like Councillor Lefebvre, if it was just in receipt, I would support it.
All right, thank you. Further comments, questions? Go ahead, Councillor Morrison.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just in clarification through you to staff, the current bylaws, because I think one of the things that was up for question was whether or not we would allow it within the industrial land, which then brings into the problem of whether they're getting taxed as farmland or industrial. So is that what is actually being reviewed right now? And as Councillor Lefebvre is saying, is this kind of redundant?
Go ahead, Mr. Manson.
If I may, Your Worship, through to Council, you're absolutely right. We can't prohibit the medical marijuana or the use of medical marijuana in agricultural land. But to the best of my knowledge right now, it would also not be permitted in the industrial park. So in essence, this would refer it back to staff for us to review to find out where it is permitted or isn't permitted and make any such changes as are required in areas of the city where council feels that it should be. So if anything, this should be referred back to staff for review and recommendation.
Okay. Go ahead, Councillor Greer.
I think the committee would certainly want to see the last part of that. I mean, the first part, licensing, fees, zoning, building regulations, is that all being looked at now? All of those things?
Yes.
Every one of them, okay. But I think the advisory committee was very strong on the latter part of that, where it says the city should not be involved financially in a medical grow operation.
Yeah, I think you've made that very clear.
Yes.
That's how they express themselves. And as I said, that's really an expressive point, since they are not in a position to bind our future hands regardless. But I think Council's clear on how they feel about that, for sure. Which is why, to me, it's really a fairly benign motion that's on the floor before us, because we are likely already into a review of our bylaws and regulations, which we would have to come back to Council with in order to determine what, if any, other areas within the city we might see as available to accommodate this kind of an industry, and then ultimately the rest, again, is just expressive. Councillor Powell-Davidson.
Thank you, Your Worship. I feel the same way as Councillor Lefebvre and Councillor Powell, and I would respectfully request that the mover and the seconder withdraw that motion, and that we vote in favor, or we put in a new motion to have this sent back to staff and receive
Or you
it
could
for
simply
review.
go ahead, Mr. Manson.
If I may, Your Worship, as a result of the notifications that we've received with regards to the medical use of marijuana and the changes that the federal government has put in place, we're already doing that right now on our own initiative. In essence, if such a resolution was passed, it would just give us formal direction for what's already going on.
All right. Go ahead, Councillor Powell.
I'd like to call the question.
You're calling for the question. Well, we do have that motion before us. I'm going to call the question. I don't think it is an issue either way, whether it passes or not, because as you just heard, there's already work underway. And at any time in the future, if that's a direction that someone wishes to proceed in terms of looking at a partnership, an RFP, et cetera, you can certainly bring that forward as a motion. There's nothing in this motion that would prevent you from doing so. So to that end, all in favor? Opposed? Yeah, so that's actually defeated. I'm voting in opposition. So that eliminates that issue, and we can carry forward from there.
Okay, you want me to talk about the casino development?
Yeah, absolutely. We'll talk about the next
You've
item.
all read that situation where, rather than go into great detail about many of the pros and cons and so on, that we should establish the company would be interested in establishing a casino in the Oceanside area in the near future before any more research be done. So what they're suggesting there is we talk to the people who build these casinos to see whether in fact they're even interested, and if they're not interested, then it's probably maybe a dead issue.
You know, I think that's actually a pretty novel idea. I mean, that might make a lot of sense, because it doesn't take a lot of effort to do that,
That's
and
right.
It provides some more information. But I think we also have to be cautious again, because I still see this as an issue that's by far not resolved. We're just gaining information
Right.
and understanding, and there would certainly be more discussion with the public at some point should we continue forward.
I can give you some pros and cons on it,
Well,
because
let's,
they did do a
let's
little
get it
research on
before
that.
us as a motion,
Okay,
and,
I'll make
and
the
we'll
motion.
see if we can do that. So the motion would be that the City of Parcel investigate whether either casino company, because there's really two predominant players here, would be interested in establishing a casino in the Oceanside area in the near future before any more research be done on the topic. So that would be the next logical step. Moved by Councillor Greer, seconded by Councillor Powell. So discussion on that motion. Go ahead, Councillor Lefebvre.
Thank you, Worship. Again, I would have preferred that it be passed on for information or to be received for information. What happens if the casino companies say, we don't know about the near future, we're not prepared to answer right now? Then what?
Well, that's what they say, and then we can continue the debate at that point, or we can reevaluate based on whatever information they have been able to provide.
If they don't come up with an answer, either they're going to build something or they're not, then at least we know where they stand. Might be down the road, but the fact is there's only the two companies that build these. And if they don't show any interest, then there's no sense of us worrying too much about it.
I think it's actually interesting. I think we might get some interesting information back as to what they see as something that might or might not work, etc. Because you remember we talked about a number of things here, not just necessarily building a casino, but amenities that can be associated with them, etc. So part of a research, really. Further discussions on this motion? All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried unanimously. Thank you. Now, let us move on to the alternate revenue sources. We don't have a motion necessarily, so I will just suggest we make a motion to receive. Moved by Councillor Powell-Davidson, seconded by Councillor Lefebvre. And then I'm going to hand the floor back to you, Councillor Greer, and we can talk about these. I would suggest perhaps one at a time, and I would love to hear what Council's thoughts are around some of these issues.
Yeah. Well, some of the alternative revenue sources, and you have them all in front of you. And of course, the first one was a destination tax be implemented. And I talked to our CAO today, and he tells us that though they do that in Ontario, collect an extra 3% on the hotel tax for the city, he tells us at BC we can't do that here. We're maxed out at the 2% that the ODCA gets. So that's off the table, I assume. Generation of power for sale, solar energy and wind turbines. I know that Councillor Lefebvre would be all over this. However, there wasn't a lot of interest shown in that at this particular time. I don't know whether anybody wants to comment on that or not.
Yeah, give me an opportunity, and then I'll turn it around. So it is interesting. I mean, we just obviously had a presentation from the Chamber of Commerce, and they're doing a little generation of power for themselves. And you recall, Council, in our last budget discussions, we did give direction to staff to provide a report back to us on the idea around implementing things like solar energy or photovoltaic cells, for instance, to help reduce some of our power demands. The city currently is almost at $1,000 a day in terms of our hydro bill. Yes, write that down, gentlemen, because I think it's a great way to express it. It's about $341,000 a year. Roughly half of that is street lighting, and the other half is consumed by everything from pumps to, of course, the buildings and facilities we operate. The staff have been, just so everyone's aware, already for some time working on reducing that power need, whether it's through new LED lighting or we're now looking at, again, solar-powered street lights even individually. The report, yeah, and a number of other things. I mean, obviously conservation is important. The report that we will likely get back from staff with respect to generating power with, say, photovoltaics will likely be exactly as you heard earlier. How much would it cost up front? What would be the return on it? How long would it take before we'd be in a position where we'd see a benefit? I don't see it as a realistic option for actually generating revenue, at least not in the context of what's being discussed here, because although reducing cost is, you could argue, is equally as important since it's still money going out the door. The only place that I'm aware of where they have wind turbines on the island is in the Northern Island, and that's not without controversy. And the outlying costs to make that happen, I think, would preclude us from being able to gain anything from selling it back to the grid if we're ever in a position of generating more than we consume. Do you want to add anything, Councillor Greer?
No,
Any member of Council want to add anything on that? Councillor Lefebvre?
Thank you, Worship. And as much as it's near and dear to my heart, I tend to agree with your comments, but I wanted to make a comment about wind turbines. We had a presentation at the RDN a number of weeks ago from a wind turbine company, and it's a very sophisticated science. They look at wind velocity, where it is and where it isn't. And I would venture to say that, in my experience in Parksville, there's not very much wind velocity at any given point in time, so I think wind turbines are... There's a lot of other issues in terms of noise and birds and where do you site it all, but I think that the key is the formula, the scientific formula for where the winds blow and where the winds don't blow. With regard to solar, I know that the province of Ontario is looking at doing some of this, but I think it's much too early. I think that the 25% increase over the next 5 years is the beginning of something that's going to happen, I would hope. But unfortunately, today, I think it's a non-starter. But it's certainly something worth keeping on the back burner.
All right, thank you, Councillor Greer. Yes. Oh, sorry, I see Councillor Neufeld. Go ahead.
Thanks very much, Your Worship. it's something that is near and dear to my heart, and I agree with Councillor Lefebvre, and that's solar energy. And in fact, I've been doing a fair amount of reading and research on this. And with the advent of new technology, what is coming forward, there's some visionaries that are saying that in fact solar energy will be in fact the energy of the future, and that's within 20 years. The amount of energy that comes from the sun on a daily basis is sufficient to provide for all of the energy needs that we have. And I think that it is absolutely critical that we consider how we can get into this market. Not sure what the process would be for a municipality, but in fact we have to get into it, and it's going to be worthwhile. The interesting thing is that the comments that I've seen on fossil fuels will be used particularly in the northern and the far southern hemispheres and that type of thing. But in fact, where the sun is radiant most of the year, and as Mr. Burden has said, we get it whether it's cloudy or not as much when it is cloudy, but still we do get it. And with storage facilities, the solar power is going to be absolutely critical, and will be the main, supposedly, the main driver of our energy resources within 20 years. Whether or not I live to see it, I'm looking forward to it, but I think that's what it's going to be. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Councillor Greer, moving on.
Moving on. The next one, negotiation of a greater transfer of provincial tax collected. They've taken the idea from Saskatchewan, where Saskatchewan gets 20% of the 5% sales tax, which amounts to literally hundreds of millions of dollars. So this is something that maybe we could make a motion to for the AVICC or the UBCM meeting and follow it through that way. Because we can't do it on our own, I'm sure, but we could maybe make some motions and stir up a little interest in the AVICC and UBCM. But if Saskatchewan can do it, I'm sure we could do it as well, unless our CAO has something against that.
Refresh my memory. This is interesting because I believe when we had the task force, as you recall, put together amongst our municipal partners, and I think you took some interest in that, Councillor Neufeld, as well as others here. They went and looked at this very question, again, generating alternative sources of revenue for municipalities, and because they fell into the same kind of difficult constraints that I think we'll find we're going to be in here, they came back with, I believe the chief recommendation was trying to gain a greater transfer of provincial tax revenues in one form or fashion. And so that is a narrative that is coming forward from local government to the province and has for some time. Go ahead, Councillor Manson. Yeah, I'm sorry to reduce your salary so significantly. Go ahead, Mr. Manson.
If I may, Your Worship, to refresh Council, that was one of the major policy papers that was discussed at the most recent UBCM. The task
what I'm referring to, yeah.
Task force led by Mayor Frank Leonard of Saanich, I believe, and others. This very subject and quite a few others were discussed in that policy paper.
Probably we should continue, though, with it and make sure that in the next AVICC meeting and the UBCM that we go through that once again.
Yeah, no, I think it's really interesting that this advisory body has sort of looked at the same issue and concluded very much in the same way that that's something important to be done. Go ahead, Councillor Lefebvre.
Thank you, Your Worship, and I would support that, although and I know that you're going to be rolling your eyes, and some of you are going to be rolling your eyes, but I see from the latest ferry and affairs announcements that there's no more sacred cows. Seniors will no longer get free sailings on the ferry system from Monday to Thursday, so the sacred cows are slowly disappearing. And if that's the case, along the lines of negotiating of a greater transfer of provincial tax collected, I was pretty radical in approaching some of the members of the committee at the UBCM with regards to generating more revenue for cities. I was saying, eliminate the homeowners grant and the seniors grant, because where does that come from? That's something that was done a long time ago. And I've modified my radicalism by saying, why wouldn't you reduce it by 20 or 25% to see what kind of revenue that would give us in terms of, and also in terms of a means test, so you wouldn't affect those who are on fixed incomes or those who weren't earning above a certain amount of money per annum, because as I said, it certainly appears that there's no more sacred cows. And if that's the case, I don't see why that for those of us that can afford it, that we wouldn't reduce the homeowners grant and the seniors grant by 20-25%, give that to the municipalities. And I don't know what kind of revenue that would generate, but I would imagine it would be maybe not a significant amount of money, but quite a bit of money.
All right, very good. Go ahead, Councillor Powell-Davidson.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a quick question through you to Councillor Greer. Will you be bringing a motion forward or crafting a resolution to bring forward to the AVICC in May in regards to lobbying the provincial government for greater transfer of tax?
That was our intention.
But will you be taking the action?
Yes.
Is what I'm asking.
Yes,
okay,
we
good,
will.
thanks.
All right, so we'll look for that motion from you, Councillor Greer, at some point in the future. Carrying on, go ahead.
The next is the cat license, which also includes dog license. It's our feeling was that both cats and dogs, and I'm not so sure whether the cats are licensed now, but certainly we're not collecting our fair share of dues on the dogs. Doing a little survey on 32 dog owners, 26 of them didn't have licenses. So we're not really collecting. You know, we have a bylaw. Here again, we're not enforcing it. And this is a small amount of revenue, but still it's revenue, and there's no sense of having a bylaw if we're not going to go after these people that aren't buying licenses.
Let me just touch on that, if you wouldn't mind, Councillor Greer, because that's a very good point. And, it was it's almost after every election when those of us who are out, and I think everyone here at the table was, as far as council is concerned, knocking on doors, right? You note how many dogs we actually have in this city. It's a tremendous number.
It's called Barksville now.
Yeah, pretty much.
It's not Parksville, it's Barksville.
And I did actually, after the last election, because that stuck in my mind, I went and asked how many dog licenses we had, and at that time it was around 700, I believe, and it may have changed or fluctuated since. So that is, I think, a valid point. And I think it's really a question of perhaps, and maybe we could do that through our news page, of sort of promoting to people, it is kind of important, it is your responsibility, comply with our bylaw and get your license, because I believe it's $25. And you know what, it can be actually a very good investment. I have a little dog, Chewy, who's a little rat terrier, a few pounds, 6 pounds. An absolute escape artist, and I hate to say it, on at least one occasion, it might have been two, I got a call from City Hall, and it's like, hey, thank you, Amanda, it was 2 occasions. And hey, we've got a little dog here with your name on it, right? So, that's the great benefit of having a license. It ties it to the individual, the animal, and your animal will be protected. And this is a business that we've gotten more into as a result of some of the services being withdrawn from the SPCA. We now have a vehicle that's equipped essentially as a dog pound truck, and we have had to, both our bylaw enforcement officers, we've had to train them to handle animals. And so it is really important. So I actually think that's a great suggestion, and perhaps we can at the very least sort of promote that a little bit, get that word out, and ask people to, hey, you know what, it is not a lot actually of money, and it has great benefits, and it would generate additional revenue for the city. Did you want to say something, Mr. Manson?
If I may, Your Worship, remind Council, I can't remember how far back, but it's not that far. As you mentioned, SPCA used to be the animal control function, or do the animal control function for the city. Part of their mandate with the contract that we have was to aggressively go after dog owners to get them to get licenses. When they stated that they were no longer prepared to do either the animal control or the dog license function, we looked at alternatives, and in the end, as a cost-cutting measure, we decided to do it in-house, saving us, if my memory right in the neighborhood of $30,000 to $35,000. Our dog license revenue is plus or minus about $20,000. So there's not a lot of money in this. To go back to the old model of aggressively trying to get dog licenses, the bylaw enforcement component of it is likely going to be more expensive than the additional revenue that you're going to get.
I think, though, if we advertised a little bit more and told people what the fines would be if they're caught without a license, maybe we'd get more people automatically to sign up. But it seems unfair to me that from the little bit of survey that we did, that most people aren't paying any attention to our bylaw. So, and I'm one to say that if we have bylaws, we should be enforcing them. If not, we shouldn't have the bylaws. But anyways, that was one of their suggestions, cats and dogs. And getting along with your situation there, I think we're becoming more and more of a dog city or a dog area. There's more and more dogs every year, it seems. So there could be some money to be made there.
On the cat side, we have had a handful of individuals, and I think that's the way to describe it, that have suggested some regulatory approach would be needed to license cats, because not so much of a concern of revenue, but just cats getting into people's gardens and things. And I think, Council, we've had discussions in the past about this, but to some of the points that Mr. Manson just made, it would be we simply don't have the enforcement capacity to try and herd cats and license them. So in that respect, I don't see a potential there, certainly to generate revenue with it.
If we had a license for cats, and we had a complaint about cats, somebody's next door cat was always in their yard, and they discovered it didn't have a license, they could complain to the city and put that person on notice that they'd have to get a license.
And they can also humanely live trap cats and then bring them to the SPCA as well, if it was something like that. I don't think that issue is actually all that great. I think there are a few persistent issues in the city that have created some angst with a few people.
It would get us off the hook, though, on the complaints that we do have.
Yes.
Anyways, the next one is parking meters on the beach, and they felt that they're not interested in parking meters anywhere other than just on the beach at this particular time, although we did talk about our parking lots as well. And that's always up for debate, and we have talked about our parking lots not that long ago. But parking on the beach, they thought in the summertime, maybe 3 or 4 months in the summertime, because what's happening are people are leaving their cars there all day. And so it's really unfair for those who come down and you see cars driving around, and they have no place to park. If we had parking meters, I don't know what the revenue would be in the summer months, but it would be more of the tourists paying for it than the local people. It was our idea on the committee, or at least the committee's idea, not to tax so much the local people, but try to raise some revenue from those coming into town. Anyways,
let's see if any members of council want to speak to that one. Go ahead, Councillor Powell-Davidson.
Thank you. Actually, I do want to speak in favor of parking meters. I would not want to see them on the beach. For one thing, I think there's tons of parking on the beach, and I wouldn't want to see the view obliterated by, if that's the correct word, by a whole bunch of parking meters sticking up out of each stall. But I would like us to discuss parking for the downtown parking lots. I've always had an issue with the fact that the City of Parcel is providing land for people to park there all day and not making a dime off of it. And I would really like to encourage this council to ask staff to do a little research for communities, particularly Nanaimo, who do have pay parking, and the hundreds of thousands of dollars of revenue they're generating. Granted, they have a lot more pay parking than we could ever have, but I think it's definitely an area worth pursuing.
Do other members of the council think that's worth pursuing? Just as a discussion, not as a motion, obviously. Go ahead, Councillor Lefebvre.
I think, Your Worship, we'd better tread very, very carefully with this, because first of all, you've got to buy and install the parking meters, and that's very expensive.
Well, the meters today, though, are just in one location.
Yeah, but then the other thing is then you've got to worry about bylaw compliance, and then you're looking at, is the bylaw officer sufficient that we have now? And then when you issue a ticket, then what's the process? So for a small city like Parksville, I think that there had better be some preliminary studies along those lines before we jump. And I see the Downtown Business Association executive director sitting here in the audience, and I'm rather suspecting that might go over like a lead balloon with a lot of the downtown businesses, but that's just right off the top.
And since we've been here for more than 2 hours now, we can probably go out and make a little revenue from some of the folks here in the audience. I'm just suggesting that. You're right, though. I think that would be something probably we would sort of refer to the PDBA and others that have an interest, obviously, in the downtown especially, to hear their thoughts on it. Although I do recall we have had discussions around paid parking in the past, and Council's been somewhat shy to move forward, and it's not as straightforward as we would hope. I do understand, though, the advisory committee's shooting at the beach only from the tourism perspective. I do get that.
And also the fact that the cars are there all day. I mean, people spend the whole entire day at the beach. You have 75 parking spaces there. And so it doesn't take that many, 75 cars. And if they stay there all day, that's the only people that can park there. So it was to move cars along as well as make some revenue.
Councillor Powell.
Thank you, Worship. When I think about having just paid parking down at the beach, what usually happens when you change something in one place, it's impacted in another place. And what I could see happening is people trying to park downtown in the limited spots that we have. And so if you're going to have paid parking at the beach, I think you have to consider paid parking uptown as well, because you're just moving the people. You know, they'll be parking down on Pioneer Crescent, all the other streets that we have, Weld Street. Like, I think we really have to look at this before we go any further with it, because when you change in one place, it impacts on the other.
It's just up for discussion. So the other is the yard sale permits. There seems to be a great number of yard sales these days on every block, and some of them are in the business of buying and selling on a regular basis. So they thought that there should be a yard sale permit. So it would be a matter of advertising. If you're going to have a garage sale, you come in and you pay for a permit, whatever that might be, $10, $15, or whatever. And you'd have to post your permit at somewhere where your sale is. I thought that was a good idea.
Staff want to comment on that at all?
Other than
so enthusiastically, go ahead. Mr.
Other than the obvious of bylaw compliance.
One of the issues with the yard sales, which is kind of interesting, is most of them occur on the weekends, and that's when we have the minimum amount of compliance or enforcement at that time. But
we don't have any on the weekends.
I'm trying to say it like we have a minimum. Well,
say it the way it is.
No, that's not true. Actually, the RCMP enforce our bylaws when our guys aren't in, but we try not to engage them on something really trivial like, what this could potentially be. So that is an issue, but it's an interesting thought. Absolutely. Carry on.
Well, the other ideas they had was park rentals, private events, example, car shows, weddings, festivals, etc. There's a lot of these happening in the park, and I'm assuming that the curling club or the RDN make the money from these, and yet they're using probably our park. I mean, we're keeping the park up, but they're making the money off it.
There's some fees associated with that, but Mr. Manson, have you not been having discussions at the staff level about sort of fee structures around facilities, parks already? I've heard that through the grapevine.
If I may, Your Worship, not for special events. As Council's aware, there is no charge for those right now. We have been looking at the possibility of sports field user fees, more for the use of the specific soccer pitches, ball diamonds, that sort of thing, tennis courts, lacrosse blocks, not for the special events and rentals that are being talked about here.
Councillor Morrison.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Given the discussions we've been having recently on the cost for user groups to have things, insurance costs and things like that, I don't think adding another layer of costs onto those things that add so much to the city in a way of events is a good idea, so I wouldn't want to see us charging any more for those.
It's interesting. I've had some expression of concern too with respect to that. I think you would want to ensure that we wouldn't be the only municipality that's charging fees. Otherwise, you could also push some of these events into other communities. And when you think of the tremendous revenues that can come sometimes, and this is for the economy more than necessarily the city, from these events, you know, it has been traditionally something that's welcomed as long as they meet, obviously, the various criteria that we put forward just to protect us from liabilities. Any other members of council wish to speak? Councillor Neufeld.
Thanks very much, Your Worship. When I look at this park rentals, you know, I can see possibly private events such as weddings, something of that nature, which is focused on a specific group. But in fact, as far as a car show is concerned, as you suggest, that'll bring in thousands of people. That's not a private event; it's a public event. You know, the festivals, as far as the Moon Festival and that type of thing, and the kites that came in, a tremendous festival. So that all of these festivals, in fact, draw economic activity into the city. So I couldn't see wanting to try and formalize a rental situation here. For a private event, for an actually private event, then I could see doing so. And I'm not sure whether it would be worthwhile. I mean, how many weddings do we have on the beach? I mean, how many other activities actually take place as far as a private event is concerned? So I'm asking the question. I don't know.
Don't have a number for you, but I actually think it's a surprisingly higher number than you might expect. That's been my impression, but I really can't give you a specific number. But that's something certainly that could be considered, specifically those smaller private events. Mr. Manson, did you want to touch on that at all?
I'm going to say at this point, Your Worship, that currently we only require special events permits for groups of 100 or more. Anybody less than 100 or a group or whatever of less than 100, we have no records, no special permits. It would be really difficult if, you know, somebody wanted to have their wedding pictures or whatever down in the park to try and control and gain some sort of a fee.
No further on that? Okay, let's move along. Councillor Greer.
All these items raise some eyebrows, and it's always difficult to raise money, you know. The city has no trouble spending money, but it's hard for them to get over the fact that, yeah, sooner or later we're going to have to raise some money. So we have to keep an open mind on some of these. Well, the second last one is privatization or sale of the Parksville Community and Conference Center. And they have asked a number of people on this, and when they find out that what we're subsidizing it for, and I think we are subsidizing it for, what, $240? Fred, can you... somewhere around there?
It's in the plus or minus 250,000.
250,000. So, and it's growing every year. So you have to start to take a look at whether this thing is worth it or not. And if you're serious here again about saving money or making money, then you have to make some hard decisions. So that was one thing that they thought that we should do, either privatize it or sell it. Any comments on that?
Yeah, any comments on that?
No comments.
That's obviously an important community asset, and any kind of a discussion like that would involve a lot of consultation. Yeah. Civic centers are never money makers that I'm aware of. Even in Nanaimo, very, very nice, bigger civic center is subsidized, which also makes me think it's likely not a good candidate for privatization, not in any sense of the way it functions now. But nonetheless, yeah, that's definitely one area.
Hard times bring on hard choices.
Continue on, Councillor Greer.
Well, grants, provincial, federal grants, they don't know, and it was more of a question than anything else, are we getting our share of federal and provincial grants? And if not, maybe we should look into seeing how many we're getting and how many we're not getting. That's the final suggestion.
So that's definitely something that we continue to do, right? Push the grant envelope. As you know, our communications officer is also a grant writer. That's part of that position. And we have been receiving some grants here and there, obviously. I don't think we're getting any less than anyone else. The next big one, of course, is going to be around the water treatment facilities that we're moving forward on, and to see what extent the federal and provincial governments are going to provide us in terms of grants. And I've already made arrangements to meet with the MP and MLA early in the new year, and you know, we really are going to have to step that up now as we approach the end of next year to make sure we have a good, clear understanding. And this is never going to be an easy game to play, because I think for the most part we don't receive nearly as much as we used to in the good old days, and it has impacted our budgets and our bottom lines for sure.
So anyways, I thank my committee, and they did a good job over the year and a half that I was their chairman. And I think they're a pretty strong committee, and they do a lot of research. And so as of the next meeting, we hand it over to Councillor Morrison. So I'm sure he'll have a lot of fun working with these people, and I'm sure you'll have about the same cooperation that I've had from council in recommending these items.
Well, you won some tonight again. No committee can bat 1,000, Councillor Greer. But actually, I'm looking forward to seeing that. And actually, Councillor, you're going to have to come up with some new things for our advisory committee in the new year. Councillor Lefebvre, yeah, we're going to go on that receipt motion in a moment.
Thank you. I would also like to thank once again the committee and Councillor Greer for the work that they've done. Coming back to the Parksville Community and Conference Center, was there any discussion about having that discussion in the community with everybody about what people generally feel about it and what other uses that may be used for?
Actually, I think we did discuss having a town hall meeting, and that wouldn't be a bad way to go. My feeling is with any of these high-profile places that you want to change or add on, such as the Arts Center that I know Bill was working on, I think going to the people of the community is the most important thing to do. And I think, for the Arts Council especially, if they had some town hall meetings, they would get a lot more support than leaving them out of the situation.
It would be interesting to have that discussion in terms of what some of the possibilities might be for that building, and hearing from the people at large. I have a final question for Councillor Greer. Did the issue of sponsorship ever come up? Was sponsorship looked at as a potential
No, and
fundraiser?
I think that was maybe my mistake, because I know you had brought it up, and I don't know whether I had brought it up at any of the meetings, but it didn't seem to get on our forum here. But certainly sponsorship is an ideal way to go as well. And yeah, that's a possibility.
Councillor Powell-Davidson.
Being as the issue of sponsorship didn't go on a discussion for further revenue generating discussions, and I have a couple more that I would like to see discussed. I wonder if we might, you just put out a quiet request for some more topics for the advisory committee going forward under Councillor Morrison's direction, and I'm wondering if we might not include in the new year that we put out some more suggestions for possible revenue generating sources that they could discuss, because I would like to see that discussion continue.
Well, it's interesting, because what this illustrates is actually, and you touched on it, Councillor Greer, it's not an easy thing for a city to actually make money or generate revenue. We tax. That's really how we're structured, and then hopefully we are somewhat moderate in our spending and delivering a bunch of services that people, quite frankly, are quite dependent upon. So it does take a lot of creativity, so much so that you might propose a public-private partnership with an industrial partner in medical marijuana or a casino. And I give great credit to all of you to even allow the latitude to have these kinds of discussions, because I can tell you a lot of politicians, even on the casino one especially, would be too fearful to even raise the topic in a community for fear of being lambasted. And what was really interesting in doing that, and I touched on this a little bit earlier, but from my perspective, is the community actually came back in a very intelligent way, and we had a very constructive conversation and continue to have really constructive conversations about these ideas. And I wasn't verbally assaulted or pitchforked or anything like that at all. People expressed their desires and or their concerns. And so, I think that's healthy. So to your end, I would like to see us in the early new year talk a little bit more about other concepts and continue these types of conversations, because sooner or later, something's going to stick, and it might stick really well to our advantage. Go ahead, Councillor Lefebvre, before we call the question.
Just a suggestion for Councillor Morrison. Slot machines in the conference center start off with about half a dozen, And I like the, what's the one, my famous slot machine is the, I forget the name of it, but when I come up with it, I'll send you an email and tell you what it is. But 6 or 7 slot machines.
How about we call the question? Thank you very much for that report, Councillor Griff. Thank you for your service on this committee. Thank your committee members, as always, for the efforts that they're undertaking. And I'm sure Councillor Morrison's going to enjoy spending some time with them early in the new year. So, all in favor of receipt motion? Opposed? That's carried. Thank you. All right, let's move along. We're now into the bylaws section of tonight's meeting. We just have one bylaw for 3 readings tonight. Of course, this is the Shelley Road Park dedication bylaw, which is a result of our decision last time to go ahead and dedicate this small parcel as park. And we do have that recommendation. Needs to be converted into a bylaw to read this number 1501 for 3 times. Moved by Councillor Neufeld, seconded by Councillor Powell-Davidson. And discussions on that? All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. We'll come back to you for adoption. And now we're moving into new business. Does any member of council have any new business? And we've had lots of opportunity to have discussions already around the table, but go ahead, Councillor Powell-Davidson.
Thank you, Worship. First of all, I just wanted to say, give a quick update of how the pop-up library is progressing. So far, the library has come on board. They will be keeping it stocking it up originally with the excess books, and they're going to be heavily involved in working on this project with me. I have had 2 contributions of materials. One from a local business, Home Hardware, is going to contribute all the hardware, and I have some lumber and some shingles being contributed. I'm still looking for a little bit more wood, but we've got the construction ready to go. Also approached the advisory design panel, and several members of that group are producing some preliminary designs for it, so they're very excited to be involved in that project. And so it's coming along very nicely. We're still expecting to go forward and have our first one ready to be installed in time for Family Literacy Day on January 27th.
All right, thank you.
Yeah. Now, the second thing I want, we all received this letter in the email last week from the City of Port Alberni in regards to the ministers responsible for the core review process for agriculture in the province, and regarding possible changes to the Agricultural Land Commission. There's some big concerns here, and having heard the Minister of Agriculture speak as recently as September, and then to see some of the proposed changes coming through the review, even though I know there's some discrepancy in the information out there, I feel very strongly that I would like to ask this council that we also send us a letter of support, not unlike the one that Port Alberni has sent to the Minister of Agriculture, as well as the Minister of Energy and Mines and Minister responsible for the core review. So I'm making a motion that we ask staff if they could craft a letter similar to this one and send it on behalf of the City of Parksville in support of asking for the key bullets in this letter. I'm not going to read them all because it's late already, but you've all got it. So there's my motion.
So you have a motion on the floor. Do we have a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Neufeld. So discussion on the motion, and that would be to essentially draft a letter very much as the City of Port Alberni and other municipalities, quite frankly, I've seen a few of these come across my desk, are currently drafting as input to the province. Do you want to speak to it? Go ahead, Councillor Neufeld, and then Councillor.
Thanks very much, Your Worship. I think that this is an extremely important document, and I've seen it. I've had a couple of copies now, and I think they make a number of points, and I think that we should, in fact, be proactive rather than waiting for what we finally have come down to us and then comment on it. I think we should take an active approach and say that these are the ways that we feel are possible impacts on us, and we want to make sure that the ALR stays in place, the ALC stays in place. This council, in fact, has had Richard Bullock attend here and some of his people, and I think that they are, in fact, have presented a very cogent argument for maintaining the ALR and ALC and I think that we have to make our voice heard and very, very much in line with what is being stated by Port Alberni, and I think it's beneficial for us. Just in talking about what they're doing and what I think Council has agreed to do in the past. I may be wrong on that, but I think that that's the approach that I would take.
All right, thank you. Councillor Lefebvre, you had your hand up?
Thank you, Worship. In listening to the comments of Minister Bennett very recently, I don't share the concern that Councillor Powell-Davidson and Councillor Neufeld have about the changes that are going to be made. I think that it's going to remain, probably with the exception of the northern part of BC, it's going to remain pretty much status quo. The other thing I use as a benchmark, for lack of a better word, the RDN at the RDN level within the electoral areas, there appears to be no particular concern, and no letter has been sent to anybody. It hasn't raised as an issue, and discussions we've had offline is that it's again, listening to Minister Bennett very recently in the last week or two, is that there's no contemplation of doing anything that would change the fundamentals of the ALR.
All right, thank you. Further comments on that? Go ahead, Councillor Powell.
Thank you, Worship. I disagree with Councillor Lefebvre. I think that this is, I remember the presentation from Richard, and he talked about the land up north and that it was extremely good growing up in that area, and he was pleasantly surprised by that. And so I think it is the beginning of the erosion of the ALC, and so I'm going to support that we write a letter like this.
All right, thank you. Further comments before I call it? All in favor? Opposed? And that's carried unanimously. All right, thank you. Councillor Morrison, you're next.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a couple of quick updates from the PDBA. As you go through the city, you'll notice there is quite a number of lit trees on some of the rooftops. Those are courtesy of the PDBA. They look very nice, Christmasing up the town a little bit. There also is an event this Saturday called Santa by the Sea. You can go through the various shops in town and vote for your favorite Santa. The beach and the Big Boys Toys motorhome will be on site from 10 till 2 on location McCarter and Hearst. And to explore the downtown, do your shopping local, and support your downtown businesses.
All right, thank you. And we have some new business from Councillor Powell.
Thank you, Worship. I attended the library board meeting, and we've come out with a branch activities report. That's going to go through every branch that we are affiliated with, that we own on Vancouver Island and the Sunshine Coast. We're quite a big area. And we even have libraries up in Haida Gwaii. I don't think people understand the size of the VIRL. And we're going to come out with this booklet, and it goes through every community that has a library and talks about the number of visitors, the programs that they run. For instance, in Parceville, we have reading readiness for children and adults, in-house programming, outreach. And so I think that it's really important that people understand that we're just not a library. We're expanding. We have e-library. We have different books by mail. You can go into a library here, and if the book is located up in Souk, they can send it here for us. We're that far-reaching, and I just wanted to make that point that the money is very well spent for the service that we get.
All right, thank you. Councillor Neufeld.
I just wanted to make a comment on Councillor Powell's comments as far as the library is concerned. I'm in full support of it. I've only been to one meeting as an alternate, and I thoroughly enjoyed that meeting. But I voted for the increase in the budget this year, and I felt that the value that we are receiving as far as that budget is just superb. I'm very much involved with education still, and I think that this is an educational process that is absolutely superb across the area that we cover as far as the IRL. Just tremendous.
All right, thank you. Don't see any more hands in the air. Shall we move to special business? I need you to Need you to make a motion that pursuant to Section 91C of the Community Charter, Council proceed to a closed meeting to consider items related to employee relations. Moved by Councillor Powell-Davidson, seconded by Councillor Morrison. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. And then we will adjourn once we have that meeting. Thank you. All right. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, once again.